It's really an honor to present my research work before all of you today. The paper I'm going to present before you all is titled as International Food Law, Historical Development and Need of Comprehensive Law. This research work mainly focuses on the international food law. So when I'm talking about international food law, so what we understand about international food law? The international food law is an evolving branch of international law whose existence has become more definite since the notion such as food insecurity, food security, and food safety emerged. Its objective is to ensure food security. So when I'm saying that its objective is to ensure food security, so it is important to understand what is this food security. Food security is actually understood as a situation where all the people at all times will have access to sufficient amount of food which is safe and nutritious. So food security is a main objective of international food law. So for international food law, we need few things, that is access, availability, affordability of food, and safe and nutritious food. What is the thought behind this study? The thought behind the study is that, according to a report published by World Economic Forum, which says that the food insecurity will still remain as a societal risk for the next 10 years, and the number of hungry people worldwide can exceed to 840 million by 2030. I know it is really very hard to believe that when we are living in a world which is so much developed technologically and economically, still food insecurity exists. So to find out why we are still having this food insecurity situation, this research work explored how the food law emerged, its development, purpose, and loopholes. Then it explored, can the present international instruments be collectively called as international food law? And lastly, whether there is a need of comprehensive international food law. The significance of this study is that it recommends a basic structure for international food law. It will contribute in the academic arena also for further research by offering concrete steps to build a comprehensive international food law and framework. And lastly, the analysis present in this research work will convey valuable information for further research to build a sustainable global food system. Now, for the purpose of this study, I have studied 100 years of international food law since the development of the concept, which is food security, which shaped up today's international food law. I've divided the study into 5 periods. One is 1920 to 1945, which is post-First World War and the League of Nations, the 1945 to 1970, post-Second World War and United Nations, the 1970 and 1990 World Food Crisis and Changing Approach, then 1990 to 2000, which I have titled as the Golden Period, and the last is 2000 to 2020, which is the challenges and the right to food. Exploring these periods, the finding of this study is that the law which is drafted, it understands food insecurity exists because of economic instability, and food trade can bring economic stability. The law, it focuses on food trade and food safety, not on food management control and waste control. The third finding is that there are multiple international instruments which focuses on food safety and food trade, but these are neither strictly binding in nature nor completely lacks in legal significance. And the contemporary international food law is more about food standards and food safety. And lastly, it lacks harmonization and cooperation at each and every level of the global food system. So the main problem of the law and why we are still facing this food insecurity is mostly because of the economic approach towards food security, the lack of institutional framework, so the global food system lacks food governance, there is unequal distribution of food. Fourth, there is no food management system and a waste control mechanism. Fifth, there is lack of cooperation and harmonization. Sixth, there is absence of general principles and international food law. And lastly, the absence of international food law that focus on building food security. So the recommendations and the suggestion of this study is that first, we need a comprehensive international food law which will mainly focus on building food security. And lastly, it gives a guideline on how to draft this comprehensive international food law. Starting with the guideline, every law needs to have an objective and a goal. So international food law, we are suggesting that it needs to have an objective that must prevent the violation of people's right to food and goal at achieving food security to ensure people's right to have food. Second, the law must contain some legal definitions of the notions such as food insecurity, food security, and right to food. Third, the law must identify its sources and the basis. The importance of identifying the sources and the basis, I'm so sorry for not changing the PPT. Please excuse me for that. Okay, so let's begin. So why it is important to have the source in the international law, in the international food law? It is important because these sources will give a broader aspect to the law. The fourth is we need to acknowledge general principles and customary law in this international food law. Customary laws such as customary laws and general principles such as precautionary principles, common but differentiating principles, principle of non-discrimination, equitably and sustainable utilizations, and due diligence. Another thing that we need to recognize is that the law must be divided into segments such as food production, supply, food standards, food safety, food trade, food waste, and rights, obligations, and responsibilities. It means that we are suggesting that the international food law must focus on food production and supply, then food standards, food safety, food trade, and food waste, and mention rights, obligations, and responsibilities in regard to it. The law must also acknowledge rights such as right to food, the right to adequate food, the right to have safe food, the right to have food of one's own preferences, the right to have food with adequate nutrients, then the right of the farmers to have technological support, and the right to farm. These are some of the rights that need to be recognized in the international food law. Another thing that we suggest is that the international food law also needs to have a dispute settlement mechanism. And lastly, it needs a legal framework for risk assessment and risk management to provide food aid and assistance. So now, what a comprehensive international food law can give, why it is important. It is important to have a comprehensive international food law because it will codify fair practice, rights, obligations, and guidance for trade and food management. It will further create an institutional framework and food governance which are clearly